Hello, good evening. I wanted to do another update video of my Navionics. So I did one last year and actually had quite a lot of positive feedback from this video. And one of the things I found is people still came to me with questions sort of where you can actually fish and how you can find your fishing marks. So I just wanted to kind of expand a little bit more on what I did last time with Navionics. So Navionics is pretty much my go-to app for finding fishing marks, for navigation and a few other bits and pieces, and I use Navionics for everything, and certainly when I'm doing my power instruction. So really useful app, highly recommend it. And if you don't know much about seamanship, I would still recommend that you go and do your power boat course, as well as known as a PB2 course with the RYA. But let's just have a look at this Navionics and see what we can see. So I've picked a random spot that I've never ever fished. I don't know anything about the spot apart from the fact that it's Portland Bill. I know a couple of things about Portland Bill, but nothing in terms of actual fishing. So when I'm looking through here, there's the first thing that sort of jumps out of me. So we've got the Portland Bill here. We've got this area called the ledge here. These two marks that you'll see here, that's the cardinal buoy. I'm going to zoom in there, it gets smaller and smaller, but this is your cardinal buoy. You can see a little triangle, inverted triangle. It looks like a W single or wine glass, which means cardinal west. And if you go through to the east, you'll see the east one there. And they're marking out the area of dangerous ground that is here. Now, this area is, I can see from Navionics, it's telling me it's called the Shambles. Very interesting area of ground. And when you're looking through, I can see already just scoping out this area. You're going from about 26 meters there, and you can see all of these lines. These are contour lines, and I've set it so each contour line is 1 meter. So you're going from about 26 meters worth of depth, and you can see following it up there, and you can see how shallow some of these areas are getting, up to 11 meters, and in some places even shallower. Now, one thing I will say straight off the bat is what you are seeing here in terms of depth may not be the depth that you're fishing at, because this is the lowest astronomical tide or the lowest depth that you're going to be able to have. You've still got to account for your tide on top of that. So just bear that one in mind. So when I'm just looking for fishing marks, here's one of the things that I'm looking at. So these are some quite amazing banks. Looking through, I don't think these are completely sandy. Some of them are sandy banks. Some of them may be slightly shaly. But I'm looking at these little drop-offs here. You see, hiding behind each of these. Now, these drop-offs are really quite useful for when I'm looking at fishing. And these are some of the marks I'm going to be looking for, because what happens is with the tides typically flow east or west. Typically, they do go around in circles and eddies and other things, but typically they flow east and west. So you're having literally the tide blowing, and as the tide's blowing over, it's blowing food, bait fish, various other bits and pieces across the banks. And as it blows across the banks, you will have your predatory fish waiting to pick them off. So you'll often have predatory fish hiding in these little eddies here. You may not get much here, but you'll have them hiding in the eddies. Likewise, when the tide is flowing the other way, you'll often hide them the other side. Where I fish, I've got a set of banks near me that the cod tend to do the same thing. So I tend to look for the little hollows. But this area of banks here, I'd probably say if I'm looking for rays, will probably be all sorts of rays there. And you're probably going to find all sorts of flatfish there as well. Wouldn't be surprised if you caught a turbot there. Who knows? I've never fished there. I have no idea what fish you're going to be finding. But you're probably going to find a real mixed species, probably gurnards there as well. A lot of bottom feeding fish, things like sand eels or other things might well be within that mark as well. So if I'm just going to have a little bit more look towards the Portland Bill area, so you can see this rocky, reefy area here. Again, these are all eddies that are coming into the rocky, reefy area. Now, the Portland Bill is famous for its tides. I can tell you without even knowing this, but here I can see I've got a warning already telling me that there is a strong current. and the strong current around Portland Bill I know flows up to about 8 knots, which is pretty impossible to fish and can be very, very dangerous in a boat. The reason why is it creates a lot of strong currents, and these are cause turbulence. So if you're in a boat, it can be extremely dangerous to fish, and especially anchor. So you have to go really, really, really careful of this. But I would say around Portland Edge, if it is fishable, certainly around slack water or where the tide is just starting to run, this area here, all around the edges here, I would say absolutely fantastic, probably for pollock or wrasse or any of those types of fish. Also probably bass will be excellent for bass. And I'm looking right, these little areas here, you can see these areas, these little eddies or these dips in between where you've got these contours. These are almost like little valleys that are running into the rocks. And these are where, if I'm drifting over here, if I'm following the drift over, I'd be looking at drifting my lures really, really low and deep into those cracks. And then I'd be bringing my lures back out. And that's where I'd be looking to expect to find the wrasse and the pollock and things like that. If the tide, say for example, the tide is coming from east to west and blowing over towards here, you've got to be also bear in mind there might be a high concentration of fish on the side, the western side, because they're waiting for the bait fish to blow over, and maybe not so much on the eastern side. So you just got to consider that the fish will move around depending on the state of the tide. So don't always go to the same place. But if you look then towards the western side, this is again where you may have the bass or the other things that are hiding through here. And just one last point for me is you've got this fantastic hole here called the deep hole. Well, it's called the deep hole, I think, or the big hole. And it goes from about 100 meters depth. If I click on that, you can see 100 meters depth to about 44 meters there. So a good, nearly 60 meter drop cliff edge here. So almost like the size of Beachy Head or something like that. Just a sheer drop down. So you're going to find some pretty amazing fish around this mark here. Again, you'll probably have bass, pollock, all types of fish. But this is another area that if I'm going for shark fishing especially, I would be pretty confident that I'll be finding all species of shark. Who knows, poor beagles, taupe, probably get some very, very nice big sharks in there, drifting a nice whole mackerel. Again, don't rule out little areas like this. A lot of people just tend to go straight to the reefs and forget about these little areas. These little areas on the side can be invaluable and hiding some pretty amazing fish. Certainly in the winter months, if I'm looking for cod, I'll be looking for these little hollows here, these little hidey places. And then again, if I'm zooming out, just looking for a few wrecks I can see. Can't see very many wrecks. Maybe there's one close in. Okay, here we go. Here's a wreck. Don't know what this wreck is. The alien sky. Okay, so a lot of people, when they're fishing these wrecks, tend to just drop their lures straight down on the wrecks and pull away. But what a lot of people don't seem to realize is with the wrecks is, again, the fish are often off the wreck. You might have the pollock above the wreck, the cod will be down on the below, right on the very bottom. So depending on what you're fishing and how you're fishing with your lures, you can use like your GT360s or your Axia minnows high above the wreck for the pollock, because you're reeling up, you'll be picking up the pollock. But if you fish right in the very bottom just before the wreck, or right in the very bottom just after the wreck, there's a good chance of cod, because that's where cod tend to sit there as well. Wouldn't be surprised, you can even get monkfish off wrecks, you can get brill off wrecks. They tend to sort of hide in the sand and the hollows around the wrecks as well. But the thing is, what people want to do, as soon as they've passed the wreck, they think, oh great, bang, we'll go around again and we'll try that wreck again. I would say don't, wait, leave it at least 100 meters off the wreck, just to drift, and try and drift your lures and things right on the ground, just past the wreck. And that's quite important, because often what you'll find, and there's wrecks past me that I know exactly where they are, but you literally, it can be 100 meters or 200 meters from the wreck. you might have a bait ball or a bass ball that can be off the wreck, and you wouldn't necessarily see it until you've gone way past the wreck. And sometimes that bass ball might literally just be feeding off bits off the wreck that are drifting down. Sometimes you can even find other things like red gurners or things like this can have a patch well away from the actual wreck itself, but just be sitting there hiding in there. And again, you also get brill or other things that will take lures as well. So don't just be so keen as soon as you've passed the wreck or fished the wreck to just come back and do it around. And the second thing is get to know the wreck. So when I'm looking at this, I can already see there's from the contours, you're rising up. So 30 meters down to about 25 meters. So this one's not that high a wreck, probably only about 5 or 6 meters in height, but it could be quite snaggy. That is the thing with wrecks. So I'm really thinking, if I'm going to go and fish this wreck, I've got about 5 meters to reel in. So if I'm drifting along here, then I'll be looking to reel up because I don't want to get my gear caught in that wreck. And then I'll just make sure I've reeled in about 5 meters, so I'm just above the wreck. And then I carry on reeling to see if there's pollock there. Once I've passed the wreck, as soon as I've passed the danger zone, I drop straight back down to the floor again, maybe half a wind in, and just let my lure drift along the bottom just to see if there's anything past the wreck. So there's lots you can do with Navionics. Navionics is pretty amazing, and the detail that you can get, you can see the detail here is just absolutely incredible. I'm using the enhanced Navionics with the relief shading, and it is just phenomenal. So yeah, this is how I plan my fishing marks. This is plan where I go. Don't just go where everyone else goes. Try new marks, try new things, and yeah, let me know how you get on with it. But I'm a huge fan of Navionics.